How can anyone, whether they want to work in a language school or privately from their own laptop anywhere in the world, create a rewarding and impactful career teaching English as a second language, even if they are just starting out or have no teaching experience or ability? Hi, my name is Lynette Kim, and here on the TESOL Talk podcast, I aim to answer that very question.
One of my favorite resources that I love to use in conversation classes is the biography exchange. This is basically a worksheet. Generally, it has like 9 boxes all ruled up, and so 3 across, 3 through the middle, like 3 rows, 3 columns basically. And you put questions in each of the boxes. Now, at the top, obviously, there's going to be an overall theme. So just say the theme might be love and relationships. And so you're going to need 9 questions to fill those boxes. And you leave space in each box. You don't want these just to be little questions with just like a blank line underneath it. You need to have the box for students to fill in information. And each of the questions needs to be a little bit controversial and thought-provoking. So under love and relationships, some of my favorite questions are, if your family hated your partner, would you break up with them? Or if you had to move away very far from your family, perhaps another country, to be with the love of your life, would you do it? Or would you break up with them to stay where you normally live? Or really, if you want to get controversial, you can go to, if you cheated on your partner, would you tell? And you always put at the end of all of these questions, why or why not? And then, you could have other questions, but all going in a similar vein. And so I've got my 9 questions that I use for love and relationships. Now, you put the question, the number and the question up the top, and then the rest of the box is left blank, because in a biography exchange, students, generally you want them up and walking around pretending that they're at a party, and this is a scenario where they're chatting and meeting people. And so, you have space for students to ask the question of a fellow student and write down their answer. It doesn't have to be the full answer, but just the basics of, yes, they would, no, they wouldn't, and why. And that's why you have why or why not. And then they might even ask a few people the same question, but they've got 9 questions. They're going to go around and chat to 9 different students at minimum and get their responses put into the little boxes. Now, let's just say that there's 9 questions and they're going to have to take about 5 minutes a question. That's basically 45 minutes straight up. Conversation classes go anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes, usually around 60. That leaves 15 minutes to get feedback for all the students to sit down and then you to randomly ask different students, okay, so you spoke to someone, you don't have to give us the name, but for question 3, and this question is, if they cheated, would they tell on their family? What did your partner answer and why? And then the student does reported speech and says, well, according to the person I spoke to, they would or wouldn't because, and then they give the response. And so it's really interesting because they don't have to say who gave the answer, but it's something that gets controversial questions, gets people talking, that controversy. And by the time you get the feedback from, like say half a dozen students related to very specific questions, the whole hour's gone. And, that's an hour's conversation class. So you have to have lots of good topics. Now, you can beef these things up too by prior to the lesson giving students specific vocabulary related to that theme of the biography exchange and the level, because biography exchanges are also great because you can dumb them down the levels or you can beef them up the levels. So you can make the questions more intricate or have more details, or you can very much simplify them for anywhere from pre-intermediate and above. So you have appropriate vocabulary, say for the theme of love and relationships, fall in love at first sight, drop dead gorgeous, all these kinds of words, things, controversial types of things, where people aren't really in love, they're infatuated, so infatuation, all these sorts of things. So students are getting some great vocabulary out of this as well. And you can teach this vocabulary prior to the lesson so they understand what it means. You have a good discussion about it, and then they have to use that vocabulary when they're answering these questions with whoever's asking. And that person's going to write down the different words that the students used. And so you get to have a discussion. And if any of the vocab is used out of context or wrongly, then, you can ask the class and they can pick up on that in the feedback section of that lesson. So these are really meaningful because remember, conversation classes are all about listening and speaking, primarily speaking. Student talk time needs to be 80% or above. And the whole goal is meaningful conversation. And here's where we really do, during the actual activity or task, use the natural approach where you're not going to correct students. But during the feedback section, afterwards, you would use correction, but say if a student made a mistake, ask a student in the class or ask the whole class, all right, so-and-so said this, but what would be the proper word that should have been used, or how should this be said, and use that opportunity for class correction. So my all-time favorite for conversation lessons, you guessed it, biography exchanges. It's a really good thing to have an arsenal of, at least a dozen or more of these, have the vocabulary listed, have a template one for each. So all you have to do is spit them out on a printer, enough for the class to each have a sheet, and hand those out. If you've got them always in a little folder ready to go on a USB, ready to print out, you'll never ever be stuck for what to do in a conversation class.